Neanderthals were absolute freaks of nature.
What if I told you that the most prepared human for the end of the world already went extinct 40,000 years ago, while you're stockpiling canned beans and watching YouTube survival tutorials? Evolution once created the ultimate doomsday-ready human model, and then promptly discontinued it like it was the biological equivalent of Google Glass. Ladies and gentlemen, meet your evolutionary cousin, the Neanderthal. Not the hunched-over, club-dragging caveman your high school textbook lazily depicted. No, these were the heavyweight champions of human evolution, built like brick shithouses with brains to match. You think your CrossFit instructor is impressive? A Neanderthal could bench press your CrossFit instructor while philosophizing about tool manufacturing. They survived multiple ice ages while modern humans get anxiety attacks when the Wi-Fi goes down for 10 minutes. For 400,000 years, that's 16,000 generations if you're counting, they dominated the most hostile environments Eurasia had to offer. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in conditions that would make a polar explorer reach for their satellite phone. But here's the kicker. Despite being nature's perfect apocalypse survivor, they vanished. Somehow, our comparatively wimpy species, with our slender builds and our tendency to get seasonal depression when it's cloudy for too long, outlasted them. It's like finding out that the Hummer went extinct while the Prius thrived. Evolution has a sense of humor, and apparently, it's dark. So, what happened? Was it a case of being too specialized? Too perfect for a world that wouldn't stop changing? Or did we, the chatty, art-making, less physically imposing Homo sapiens, have something they didn't? Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the world of our lost human cousins, not as the grunting stereotypes they've been reduced to, but as the sophisticated, powerful, and eerily familiar humans they actually were. Consider this. Every non-African human alive today carries approximately 2% Neanderthal DNA. That's right, they're literally in our blood. They're the ghost in our genetic machine, the prehistoric text message that never stopped delivering. These weren't failed humans. They were alternative humans, a different answer to the same evolutionary question. How do we survive in a world that's actively trying to kill us? And as our own climate spirals into unpredictable chaos, perhaps there's never been a better time to understand the original masters of apocalyptic survival. Because let's face it, in a world where extreme weather event has become as common a phrase as please like and subscribe, we might want to take notes from the species that treated ice ages like we treat mild inconveniences. Welcome to Neanderthals, nature's perfect apocalypse survivor, where we'll discover how these Ice Age powerhouses lived, loved, and ultimately lost the greatest survival game in human history. Let's meet the ultimate survivalists who didn't survive. Imagine your worst winter day. Now make it last 100,000 years and add hungry carnivores the size of small cars. Welcome to the Pleistocene, nature's way of saying, let's see how you like Earth on hard mode. During the time of Neanderthals, Europe wasn't the quaint collection of cafe-dotted countries we know today. It was the equivalent of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, minus the convenient abandoned supermarkets to scavenge from. At the peak of the Ice Age, ice sheets 3 kilometers thick crushed everything from what's now London to Moscow. That's like stacking 30 football stadiums on top of each other and spreading it across an entire continent. Not exactly prime real estate. But here's where it gets interesting. The Ice Age wasn't just one long winter. It was climate change on steroids, vacillating wildly between deep freezes and brief, tantalizing warm periods. Imagine finally adjusting to your Arctic hellscape, only for it to transform into a lush paradise, then back again, like Mother Nature had severe bipolar disorder. These weren't gentle transitions either. Recent research suggests some climate shifts happened within a single human lifetime. One generation is hunting reindeer across frozen tundra, Their grandchildren are dodging forest elephants in woodland. It was evolutionary whiplash. And the wildlife? Forget your charming deer and occasional bear. The Pleistocene was the age of megafauna, nature's experiment with supersizing everything with teeth and horns. Woolly mammoths standing 4 meters tall with tusks like telephone poles. Cave lions 25% larger than modern African lions. Woolly rhinoceroses that made today's rhinos look like therapy pets. This wasn't a petting zoo. It was a constant, roaming existential threat. Yet Neanderthals didn't just survive here. They specialized in this environment. While evolution tends to favor generalists, Neanderthals said, "Hold my fermented mammoth milk," and became Ice Age specialists. Their tools weren't the primitive rocks you might imagine. They crafted specialized implements, different designs for different prey, different seasons, different materials. They were the original multi-tool enthusiasts, making Swiss Army knives look like one-trick ponies. While early Homo sapiens were developing their own toolkit in Africa, Neanderthals had already perfected Ice Age living. They were the premium, deluxe, limited edition humans, customized for the world's most hostile environment. Home wasn't just wherever you could find shelter either. Neanderthals created semi-permanent residences, often in caves, nature's ready-made fortresses. These weren't damp, miserable holes. Archaeological evidence shows organized living spaces with dedicated areas for different activities. Essentially, they invented the floor plan while the rest of the world was figuring out that rocks could break things. Their hearths, the prehistoric equivalent of the family kitchen, were engineering works of art, strategically placed to maximize heat distribution. They weren't just making fire. They were creating climate-controlled environments 400,000 years before Nest thermostats. And let's talk food. The Pleistocene wasn't exactly bursting with convenient calories. There were no fields of grain, no domesticated animals, no DoorDash. Every meal was a victory against starvation. Isotope analysis of Neanderthal bones tells us they were primarily carnivores, apex predators who occasionally supplemented their diet with plants when they could find them. They weren't vegetarians by any stretch, but they weren't ignorant of plant resources either. They were the original paleo-dieters, minus the Instagram posts about it. Evidence shows they could bring down prey as large as mammoth and woolly rhino, though they preferred medium-sized ungulates like deer and horse when available. This wasn't just hunting. It was tactical warfare against animals that could kill you with a casual swipe. The sheer calories required to maintain a Neanderthal body in freezing conditions meant constant hunting. They were burning through 3,500 to 5,000 calories daily, the equivalent of an Olympic athlete in training, except their training was simply Tuesday in the Ice Age. And they did all this without Gore-Tex, without satellite weather forecasts, without Google Maps. Their GPS was in their heads. Mental maps of resources spanning hundreds of square kilometers, updated seasonally as conditions changed. In short, they didn't just inhabit the Ice Age, they mastered it. They weren't surviving in spite of the conditions, they were thriving because of them. They were perfectly adapted to a world that was perfectly hostile. When modern humans talk about surviving the apocalypse, we're essentially describing Tuesday for a Neanderthal, and they did it for 400,000 years without a single YouTube tutorial. The classic Neanderthal, hunched over, dragging his knuckles, grunting his monosyllabic thoughts while trying to remember which end of the stick is the poking part. It's an image as scientifically accurate as thinking the Earth is carried through space on the back of 4 elephants standing on a turtle. The reality? Neanderthals stood upright. Shocking, I know. Their posture was essentially modern. The hunched appearance in early reconstructions came from an unfortunate specimen with arthritis. Imagine if aliens judged all of humanity based on your grandfather after a lifetime of playing golf. And that vacant, animal-like stare we've projected onto them for decades? Pure fantasy, Behind those prominent brow ridges were eyes as observant and calculating as any humans, possibly more so, given their larger visual cortex. The truth is, we've been telling ourselves a comforting fairy tale, that these others were lesser versions of ourselves, evolutionary rough drafts before the masterpiece of Homo sapiens was unveiled. It's helped us sleep better at night, knowing we deserved to survive while they didn't. But science has a funny way of ruining perfectly good prejudices. Let's look at their brains, shall we? Neanderthals had larger brains than modern humans, averaging around 1500 cc compared to our 1350 cc. But size isn't everything, I hear you protest. True enough. But before you get too defensive about your comparatively modest cranium, consider this. Their brains had especially enlarged visual and somatic regions, specialized for processing complex spatial information and body awareness. Essentially, they were hardwired for 3D thinking in ways we can barely comprehend. Their technology wasn't crude either. The Mysterian toolkit consisted of specialized implements crafted with techniques requiring not just strength, but precision and planning. The Levallois technique they mastered allowed them to create predetermined shapes from stone cores, essentially programming the rock to break exactly as intended. This isn't banging rocks together, it's computational thinking with lithics. They weren't just making pointy sticks, they crafted specialized cutting tools, scrapers, points, and awls, a complete toolkit for processing everything from mammoth hides to delicate plant fibers. These weren't just tools, they were extensions of Neanderthal cognition, physical manifestations of complex mental templates. And that birch tar adhesive? It required maintaining precise temperatures between 340 and 400 degrees Celsius for extended periods, something modern experimental archaeologists struggle to replicate without thermometers. This wasn't primitive technology, it was chemistry without a lab coat. Speaking of fire, they didn't just use it, they mastered it. Evidence suggests they could create fire at will rather than simply preserving naturally occurring flames. That's the difference between owning a lighter and having to wait for lightning to strike every time you want to cook dinner. Their hearths weren't random campfires either. They engineered them with stone surrounds for heat reflection, positioned them for optimal ventilation, and maintained them for long periods. This wasn't just making fire, it was domestic engineering. Perhaps most telling is how they treated their dead. Neanderthals buried their deceased, sometimes with grave goods and evidence of funerary rituals. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, one burial contained pollen from 8 different flowering plants, possible evidence of a flower burial 70,000 years ago. This isn't the behavior of mindless brutes. This is evidence of symbolic thinking, of concepts like afterlife, of emotional attachments that transcended practical concerns. In other words, evidence of minds not so different from our own. They created personal ornaments too, pendants made from eagle talons, showing tool marks where they'd been carefully removed and modified. This isn't survival behavior, it's aesthetic expression, the precursor to that overpriced designer watch you bought to impress people at dinner parties. And they cared for their injured and elderly. Skeletal remains show healed injuries that would have required long-term care. Individuals who couldn't hunt or gather for weeks or months, yet survived because their community supported them. One specimen from Shanidar had a withered arm, deafness in one ear, and was partially blind, yet lived into his 40s, an impressive age for the Paleolithic. This wasn't just pack behavior. This was compassion, recognizing the value of a life beyond its immediate utility. They weren't calculating cost-benefit analyses. They were caring for their loved ones because it was the right thing to do. There's even growing evidence they created art, from ochre pigments showing processing for non-utilitarian purposes to possible cave paintings predating Homo sapiens in Europe. The lines between them and us aren't just blurring, they're being erased entirely. So why the persistent stereotype? Why do we cling to the image of the stupid caveman when evidence points to sophisticated minds? Perhaps because it's easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth that a species as intelligent as our own, perhaps even superior in some cognitive domains, still went extinct. The brutish Neanderthal isn't science, it's propaganda, a story we tell ourselves to justify our dominance. They were too stupid to survive is more comforting than they were as smart as us, but still disappeared. Because if they could go extinct, despite their intelligence, their strength, their sophisticated culture, what does that say about our own future? If humans were designed by committee, Homo sapiens would be the economical, fuel-efficient model, while Neanderthals would be the limited edition performance version with all the upgrades, the biological equivalent of, but can it run crisis? Let's start with the chassis. Neanderthals were shorter than the average modern human, typically 5'5" for males and 5'1" for females. But what they lacked in height, they made up for in sheer physical presence. Their bodies were built like prehistoric tanks, barrel-chested with shoulders so broad they'd get stuck in modern doorways. Their rib cages were larger and more flared than ours, housing lungs with potentially greater capacity, perfect for supplying oxygen to muscles working overtime in freezing conditions. This wasn't just being stocky. This was evolutionary specialization for power generation. Their bones were thicker, their muscle attachment sites more pronounced, suggesting musculature that would make Olympic weightlifters look like they skip leg day. Based on muscle attachment points on their fossils, researchers estimate Neanderthals were somewhere between 30–50% stronger than modern humans. Think about that. The strongest human you know, then add half again their strength. That's not just strong, that's accidentally rip the car door off strong. Their arm bones show adaptations consistent with habitually generating massive force, not just in front-to-back movements like modern humans, but in rotational strength as well. Their hunting technique likely involved close-quarters combat with large animals, using thrusting spears that required immense upper body power. Imagine routinely walking up to an animal weighing over a ton with sharp tusks and a bad attitude and deciding, I'm going to stab this thing at arm's length. That's not hunting, that's a death wish, unless you've got the physical abilities to back it up. Their legs tell a similar story. Neanderthal femurs were bowed and thick-walled, designed to absorb enormous mechanical stress. Their knees and ankles were broader, distributing weight and impact forces more effectively across rough terrain. Imagine a human built specifically for parkour across frozen mountainous landscapes. No trails, no supportive footwear, just raw biomechanical efficiency that would make the most elite modern athletes look like they're moving in slow motion. Their wider pelvis created a more stable center of gravity, ideal for generating power and maintaining balance on treacherous Ice Age terrain. Modern humans, with our narrower pelvises optimized for long-distance walking, would struggle to match their stability on steep, icy slopes. Even their hands were specialized power tools, broader fingertips with enlarged touch receptors for enhanced tactile sensitivity, shorter fingers with more robust bones for improved grip strength. Their hands weren't just stronger, they were smarter, capable of both brutal power and surprising precision. And cold? They laughed at cold. Their body proportions followed Bergman's and Allen's rules for cold adaptation. Larger, more compact torsos with shorter limbs minimize heat loss in frigid environments. It's the same reason Inuit populations have similar body proportions today, except Neanderthals took it to 11. Their nasal cavities were enlarged and elongated, efficiently warming and humidifying frigid air before it reached their lungs. Their sinuses were structured to recapture heat from exhaled breath. They weren't just surviving in the cold, they were engineering their own internal climate control systems. Those famous brow ridges weren't just for looks either. They likely provided additional protection for enlarged frontal sinuses and may have helped shield their eyes from harsh glacial sunlight reflecting off snow and ice. They were built-in biological sunglasses for a world where UV reflection could literally blind you. Speaking of eyes, there's evidence their visual systems were different from ours. Their occipital lobes, the brain's visual processing centers, were larger. Combined with larger eye sockets, this suggests enhanced visual acuity, particularly in low-light conditions. Think about the survival advantage of superior night vision in a world where winter darkness lasted for up to 18 hours a day at northern latitudes. While Homo sapiens was huddled around fires waiting for dawn, Neanderthals may have been actively hunting and gathering in what we would consider functional darkness. Their larger brains weren't just for show either. While overall cognitive capabilities were likely similar to modern humans, their neural architecture appears to have been differently organized, with proportionally more brain power dedicated to bodily awareness, visual processing, and motor control. Imagine having a mind where your body's position in space, the visual landscape around you, and the physical forces you're generating are rendered in high-definition detail. They weren't just stronger, they were operating with a different user interface, one optimized for their physically demanding lifestyle. Their sensory world was likely different from ours in other ways too. Their ear structures suggest they may have had different hearing capabilities, potentially more sensitive to certain frequency ranges that would aid in detecting prey or predators in dense forests or during storms. Even their blood was likely different. Higher red blood cell counts would have efficiently delivered oxygen to their powerful muscles, especially in the thin air of higher altitudes where many Neanderthal sites have been found. Their metabolism ran hotter too, literally. Estimates suggest they burned up to 4,000 calories daily just for basic functions, with active days requiring 5,000 to 7,000 calories, more than twice what the average modern human consumes. That metabolic furnace generated heat that helped them survive in sub-freezing temperatures with surprisingly minimal clothing. Evidence for complex, tailored garments is limited, suggesting they may have relied more on their biological adaptations than elaborate clothing technology. They were essentially walking space heaters, radiating enough warmth that huddling together in their cave dwellings could raise the ambient temperature significantly. Their family groups weren't just social units, they were biological heating systems. And reproduction? Their robust bodies came with trade-offs. Skeletal evidence suggests Neanderthal women had slightly wider birth canals than modern humans, possibly accommodating infants with larger heads. However, their babies were likely born at an earlier developmental stage, requiring more intensive parental care early in life. This extended period of helplessness would have required sophisticated social structures, cooperative childcare, food sharing, protection of vulnerable group members. These weren't solitary brutes, they were deeply interdependent social beings whose survival depended on tight-knit community bonds. In essence, Neanderthals weren't just humans with a few tweaks. They were a fundamentally different expression of humanity, one where robustness, cold adaptation, and raw physical power were pushed to extremes we can barely comprehend today. Modern humans encountering Neanderthals wouldn't have seen primitive versions of themselves. They would have seen supernatural beings, humans seemingly impervious to cold, capable of astonishing feats of strength, moving through darkness with confidence, and bringing down prey that should have been impossible to hunt. They weren't less than us. In many ways, they were more. They were human, amplified. Every species has its day in the evolutionary sun. For Neanderthals, that day lasted 400,000 years, an impressive run by any standard. But roughly 40,000 years ago, the curtain began to fall on humanity's greatest physical specimens in what remains one of paleoanthropology's most enduring mysteries. Their decline wasn't sudden. No asteroid impact, no volcanic apocalypse. It was slow, relentless, and eerily similar to watching a corporate giant gradually lose market share to a more agile competitor. Over several thousand years, their range contracted like a melting ice sheet, retreating to isolated pockets in Iberia, Croatia, and the Caucasus Mountains. Climate change played its part. After 400 millennia of adapting to cold, Neanderthals faced a warming world that transformed their specialized hunting grounds into forests. Imagine being the world's greatest hockey player, only to wake up one day to discover all the rinks have melted and everyone's playing basketball. The very adaptations that made them Ice Age royalty became evolutionary liabilities. Those barrel chests and powerful limbs required massive caloric intake, sustainable when mammoths and giant deer roamed open tundra, less so in dense forests where smaller, faster prey dominated. It wasn't just the warming either. The climate became wildly unstable, lurching between warm and cold phases with unsettling frequency. For a species that had specialized in one extreme, this climatic ADHD proved challenging. They were the ultimate cold weather specialists in a world that couldn't make up its mind. And then there were the newcomers. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began arriving in Europe in significant numbers. These weren't the first human contacts. Evidence suggests the species had been aware of each other for tens of thousands of years prior. But this time was different. These weren't isolated encounters. This was a demographic tide. Homo sapiens populations were booming, expanding out of Africa with numbers that Neanderthals, with their lower population densities, couldn't match. It wasn't necessarily violent conquest. The popular image of spear-wielding Homo sapiens warriors driving Neanderthals to extinction makes for dramatic documentaries, but poor science. The reality was likely more complex, and in some ways, more tragic. Evidence suggests Homo sapiens had several subtle advantages. Their slender builds required fewer calories to maintain. Their throwing technology, particularly the atlatl or spear thrower, allowed hunting at safer distances. Their larger social networks spread innovations faster and provided more resilience against local disasters. Genetics tells us interbreeding occurred, sometimes frequently. The average non-African human today carries about 2% Neanderthal DNA, suggesting repeated intimate contact between the species. These weren't just one-off encounters, but potentially sustained relationships. But interbreeding may have contributed to their decline through genetic absorption rather than replacement. Imagine being gradually voted out of the gene pool, your distinctive traits diluted generation by generation until what made you unique simply faded away. Disease may have played a role too. Homo sapiens, arriving from Africa with their own microbial stowaways, potentially introduced pathogens that Neanderthal immune systems had never encountered, a prehistoric pandemic scenario that wouldn't leave evidence in the fossil record. And there's evidence their final populations became dangerously small and isolated. Genetic studies of late Neanderthals show signs of inbreeding and low genetic diversity, the same issues that threaten endangered species today. When populations drop below certain thresholds, extinction becomes a mathematical near certainty. Their last known refuge was Gibraltar, the southernmost tip of Spain, where evidence suggests they persisted until about 28,000 years ago. Picture it, the last bands of these ice-adapted humans clinging to existence on sunny Mediterranean shores, about as far from their evolutionary comfort zone as possible. The final Neanderthals weren't conquered. They simply faded away, outcompeted in some regions, absorbed through interbreeding in others, victims of changing climate and dwindling numbers in a tragic feedback loop of decline. Their extinction wasn't inevitable. Small shifts in any factor, climate stability, interbreeding patterns, technological innovation, might have resulted in a world where Neanderthals still walked among us as a distinct human species. Instead, they live on only in our DNA, ghost lineages in our genome that occasionally express themselves in traits like red hair, cold adaptation, or immune responses. They're not entirely gone, they're just thoroughly diluted. The story of their disappearance isn't just ancient history. It's a sobering reminder of how quickly evolutionary success can turn to failure when conditions change. They were the ultimate specialists in a world that suddenly demanded generalists. Their decline wasn't a triumph of our superiority, but a complex interplay of factors that happened to favor our particular set of adaptations at that specific moment in Earth's history. Had the climate oscillated differently, had population dynamics shifted slightly, it might have been Homo sapiens consigned to a footnote in evolutionary history. The last Neanderthal died, having no idea they were the last. No understanding that their kind, after 400,000 years of evolutionary success, would be remembered only through bone fragments and DNA sequences. There was no dramatic last stand, no final battle, just a quiet fading away that went entirely unrecorded. Until now, look in the mirror, that slightly pronounced brow, the shape of your skull, the way your body responds to cold, the immunities coded in your cells. You're looking at a ghost, the genetic echo of a species we once considered separate from ourselves. Neanderthals didn't disappear. They got diluted into us, a genetic sleeper agent activated when you unexpectedly handle cold better than your friends, or when certain pathogens fail to take hold in your cells. They're the ancestral code running quietly in the background of our modern operating system. The ultimate survivors didn't survive as a distinct species, but their legacy continues every time a Neanderthal gene expresses itself in your body. They didn't just go extinct, they changed strategies. When you can't beat them, become them. We stand here now, 7.9 billion strong, having conquered every habitat on Earth, from deserts to Arctic research stations, largely thanks to our adaptability, our generalist approach to survival. We're the Swiss Army knife to their specialized power tool. But here's the uncomfortable truth we rarely acknowledge. Our victory might be temporary. In the grand evolutionary game, 40,000 years is nothing, a mere eye blink in Earth's history. Our generalist strategy works brilliantly until it doesn't. As we rapidly transform our planet, creating climate instability that mirrors what Neanderthals faced, we might discover that specialized adaptation has its advantages after all. The very traits that doomed them might have been perfect for the world we're inadvertently creating. Maybe the true irony is that after absorbing their genes, after replacing them as Earth's dominant human species, we're now steering ourselves toward the same trap that caught them, becoming too specialized, too dependent on a particular set of environmental conditions that we ourselves are destabilizing. We've specialized not in physical adaptations, but in technological ones, creating artificial environments that shield us from natural selection. We've become Ice Age specialists of a different sort, adapted to a climate-controlled, resource-abundant world of our own making. What happens when that artificial environment fails? When our technological buffers against nature's extremes begin to crumble? Will the Neanderthal genes we carry offer a slim advantage in a harsher world? Or have we engineered ourselves into the same evolutionary corner they once occupied? Perhaps the most profound legacy of Neanderthals isn't just their DNA in our cells, but the warning their extinction provides. Specialization, whether biological or technological, creates vulnerability when conditions change. The illusion of permanent dominance is just that, an illusion. We don't know if we'll outlast Neanderthals' impressive 400,000-year run. Given our current trajectory, it seems optimistic to assume we'll match their longevity. The cosmic joke may be that after absorbing them, after studying them as primitive predecessors, we might not even match their evolutionary staying power. So the next time you catch yourself thinking of Neanderthals as failed humans, as evolutionary dead ends, remember that the jury is still out on our own species' longevity. We haven't won the game. We've simply advanced to the next round. They watch us now from within our own DNA, part of us yet distinct, a reminder that no species is guaranteed permanent residence on this planet. Their whisper from the past carries a warning about our future. Neanderthals aren't just our past. In a very real sense, they are us. And whatever future awaits humanity, they'll be along for the ride, written in the code of our very being. Not conquered, not replaced, but transformed and integrated into the next chapter of the human story. The perfect apocalypse survivors live on, inside every one of us. The question is, will it be enough when our own apocalypse comes? Imagine waking up to palm trees swaying outside your window in Iceland. No, you haven't been mysteriously teleported to Miami after a wild night out. This was reality about 15 million years ago. Welcome to Earth's awkward teenage phase, the Miocene, when our planet couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a tropical paradise or an ice-covered hermit. You think your mood swings are bad? Try being a planet going through climate puberty. The Miocene epoch spanning from 23 to 5.3 million years ago was like that friend who changes their entire personality every few years. "I'm into being super hot now," declared Earth for the first few million years, before dramatically announcing, "Actually, I think I'll try being cooler and more distant." Classic Earth. While we humans obsess over a few degrees of warming today, the Miocene laughs at our amateur numbers. This was climate change on steroids, without the pesky humans to blame it on. Mother Nature flying solo on her journey to climatic extremes. If our planet had a dating profile during this time, it would read, "Moody planet seeking stable orbit, enjoys long periods of warming followed by unexpected cooling, prone to dramatic continental rearrangements and spontaneous glacier formation. Not looking for anything serious, just 17 million years of evolutionary pressure." The Miocene wasn't just another boring chapter in Earth's diary. It was the geological equivalent of a reality TV show where the contestants are continents. The challenges involve reconfiguring global ocean circulation, and the prize is getting to dictate which species live or die. Talk about high-stakes entertainment. During this epic planetary mood swing, mammals were having their moment in the evolutionary spotlight. Apes were experimenting with this weird new trend called standing upright. It'll never catch on. Horses were downsizing from the equivalent of a Labrador to something more economical, and whales were finally committing fully to the ocean lifestyle after millions of years of indecision. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just some random climatic temper tantrum. The Miocene climate roller coaster shaped our world in ways that echo into the present. That savanna where lions now chase their dinner? Thank the Miocene cooling. Those ice sheets that are currently melting faster than ice cream in August? They got their start in the Miocene. Your existence as a hairless, anxious ape obsessed with looking at small, glowing rectangles? You can trace your evolutionary roots right back to the forests and emerging grasslands of this tumultuous time. So buckle up, dear viewer. We're about to embark on a journey through one of Earth's most dramatic climatic soap operas, where the temperature swings were wilder than a pendulum on espresso, and evolution was forced to either adapt or die trying. This isn't just another dusty geology lesson. This is Miocene, when Earth couldn't make up its mind. Let's set the stage for our planetary drama. Picture Earth, 23 million years ago. The continents, while not exactly where your GPS would find them today, were getting eerily close to their current positions, like furniture being rearranged for a party that's still hours away. North and South America remained divorced, separated by a watery gap that made the Panama Canal look like a kiddie pool. This oceanic highway allowed Atlantic and Pacific waters to mingle freely, like guests at a cocktail party that hadn't yet turned awkward. Australia had recently broken up with Antarctica and was steadily drifting northward, taking its peculiar pouched passengers along for the ride. The Mediterranean Sea was playing hide-and-seek with the planet repeatedly disappearing entirely as its connection to the Atlantic closed, transforming into a massive salt flat that would make the Dead Sea look like a freshwater spring, then flooding dramatically when the barriers broke. Talk about commitment issues. India, meanwhile, was continuing its slow-motion collision with Asia, creating the Himalayan mountain range in what might be described as the longest traffic accident in Earth's history. This tectonic fender bender was pushing mountains skyward at the geological equivalent of watching paint dry a few millimeters per year, adding up to the impressive peaks that now make oxygen-starved climbers question their life choices. But the real star of our Miocene drama was the climate specifically, its inability to maintain a consistent temperature for more than a few million years at a time. The early Miocene kicked off with a planetary fever, inheriting the warmth of the preceding Oligocene. Global temperatures were 3–4 degrees C warmer than today, which doesn't sound like much until you realize it's enough to turn Nebraska into a tropical paradise. Carbon dioxide levels hovered around 400–500 parts per million, ironically similar to what we've recently achieved through industrial determination. Except back then, it was all natural, artisanal carbon dioxide, none of that artificial, human-made stuff we're so proud of today. Then came the Middle Miocene climatic optimum around 17 to 15 million years ago, though optimum is a relative term, unless your idea of optimal is cranking up Earth's thermostat even further. During this peak heating season, temperatures soared to 5 to 8 degrees above today's averages. Antarctic ice sheets partially melted like forgotten ice cream in a toddler's grip, and sea levels rose 40 meters higher than today's, enough to give modern coastal real estate developers nightmares. The evidence for this hothouse Earth is written in the most unlikely places: fossils of breadfruit trees in Germany, palm trees in Switzerland, crocodiles taking a vacation in the Canadian Arctic. Ellesmere Island, now a frozen wasteland at 80 degrees north latitude, sported lush forests that would make Hawaii jealous. Imagine polar bears, which didn't exist yet, needing sunscreen and tropical drinks with tiny umbrellas. But like all good things and bad reality TV shows, the warming couldn't last forever. Around 14.8 million years ago, Earth apparently decided that being hot was so last season, and began the long, slow process of cooling down. This wasn't a gentle adjustment of the thermostat, it was a climate intervention that would reshape ecosystems across the planet. The cooling trend accelerated with the dramatic growth of the East Antarctic ice sheet around 13.9 million years ago, in what geologists call the Middle Miocene climate transition. Imagine Antarctica suddenly deciding to put on a massive ice cap, dropping global sea levels and changing ocean circulation patterns. It was the planetary equivalent of someone suddenly turning on the air conditioning full blast during a house party. What caused this dramatic climate plot twist? Like any good mystery, we have several suspects. Decreasing atmospheric CO2 levels certainly played a role, dropping to near pre-industrial levels by the late Miocene. The movement of continents reconfigured ocean currents, altering heat distribution like changing the plumbing in a house. The rising Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau may have altered atmospheric circulation and weathering rates, essentially acting as Earth's own thermostat. And changes in orbital parameters, the slight wobbles and tilts in Earth's rotation and orbit, added seasonal plot twists to the cooling narrative. By the late Miocene, around 75.3 million years ago, Earth had transformed dramatically. The Antarctic ice sheet was now firmly established, like an unwelcome houseguest who decides to move in permanently. Glaciers began forming in Greenland, foreshadowing the Ice Age drama that would dominate the upcoming Pleistocene season. Global temperatures had dropped to within 2 or 3 degrees of modern levels, practically chilly by Miocene standards. This cooling didn't happen in a vacuum. As temperatures dropped, the hydrological cycle changed its programming. Rainfall patterns shifted like fickle fashion trends. Regions that once enjoyed regular precipitation found themselves increasingly parched. The planet was becoming not just cooler, but also drier in many areas, the geological equivalent of turning down both the thermostat and the humidifier. The most visible manifestation of this climate makeover was the expansion of grasslands at the expense of forests. Trees, those ancient drama queens of the plant kingdom, found conditions increasingly challenging as rainfall became seasonal rather than year-round. Grasses, the scrappy underdogs of the plant world, seized their moment, spreading across continents with the relentless determination of a suburban lawn. The C4 photosynthetic pathway, a more efficient water-conserving process, evolved in grasses during the late Miocene, giving them the competitive edge in this new, drier world. As we close the geological context of our Miocene drama, remember this. Earth's climate had gone from tropical vacation to pack a light jacket in the span of 17 million years. Continents had nearly reached their modern positions. Mountains had risen, sea levels had fallen, and grasslands had staged a global takeover. The stage was set for evolutionary innovations that would eventually lead to something truly terrifying. Humans with documentary cameras, ready to narrate it all with inappropriate sarcasm. The Miocene was Earth's ultimate bait and switch. Picture this. You're a happy little mammal species, evolving comfortably in your warm, forested paradise. Life is good. Fruits hang low, predators are manageable, and you've got this whole adaptation thing figured out. Then plot twist. The planet decides to gradually pull the climatic rug out from under your tiny mammalian feet. This wasn't just inconvenient, this was existential whiplash. For species that had evolved during the balmy early Miocene, the cooling trend was like showing up to a pool party only to find the pool has been drained and replaced with a skating rink. Sure, you can adapt, but it's going to be awkward and someone's definitely getting hurt. The early Miocene was a time of relative stability and abundance, if your definition of stable includes being consistently hot and humid. Forests stretched from pole to pole like an overzealous carpet installation. Rainfall was generous and predictable. Food was abundant for forest-dwelling creatures. It was paradise, if your idea of paradise includes mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds and fungi that would colonize your shoes within minutes. For tree-dwelling species, the early Miocene was the golden age. Primates, including our distant ancestors, enjoyed an all-you-can-eat buffet in the treetops. Fruit was plentiful, branches were numerous, and the living was easy. Our ancient relatives could swing through uninterrupted forest canopies, never needing to touch the dangerous ground where predators lurked. It was the ultimate gated community, just climb a tree and you're safe. But as the climate cooled and dried, those continuous forests began to fragment like a broken mirror. Suddenly, those same tree-dwelling species found themselves on arboreal islands, separated by expanding grasslands. What was once a simple branch-to-branch commute became an exposed and dangerous journey across open ground. Imagine your daily trip to work suddenly requiring you to cross an alligator-infested moat. That's essentially what happened to forest species as the Miocene progressed. The cooling climate created a cascade of dangers. As forests retreated, food sources became concentrated and less reliable. Competition intensified. Species that had specialized in particular forest niches found their evolutionary specializations becoming liabilities rather than assets. It was like showing up to a job interview with an obsolete skill set, technically impressive but utterly useless in the new environment. For some creatures, the changing conditions created unexpected opportunities. The expansion of grasslands opened new ecological niches for species that could exploit them. Grazing animals with specialized teeth and digestive systems found themselves with expanding buffet options. Predators that could chase prey across open terrain suddenly had a competitive advantage over ambush hunters adapted to forest settings. One species' climate catastrophe was another's golden opportunity. Perhaps nowhere was this contrast between safety and danger more pronounced than in the evolution of our own ancestors. Early Miocene apes lived comfortable lives in extensive forests. But as forests fragmented, some ape populations found themselves stranded in woodland patches surrounded by expanding grasslands. These apes faced a stark choice: adapt to more terrestrial lifestyles or face extinction. This environmental pressure cooker forced innovations. Bipedalism, standing upright on two legs, may have evolved as an adaptation to move efficiently between forest patches across dangerous grasslands. Imagine being the first ape to decide, you know what, I'm going to stand up and walk across this predator-filled savanna instead of waiting for the forest to grow back. That's not just adaptation, That's evolutionary chutzpah. The changing climate also created geographical danger zones. As mountain ranges rose and rainfall patterns shifted, once continuous habitats became divided by impassable barriers. Species found themselves isolated in shrinking habitat islands, unable to migrate as conditions changed. These isolated populations faced a brutal evolutionary ultimatum: adapt rapidly, move, or die. Marine ecosystems weren't spared from this safety-to-danger transition either. The closing of the Tethys Sea, an ancient waterway that once connected the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean through the Mediterranean, created a dead-end trap for marine species. When the Mediterranean repeatedly evaporated during the late Miocene in what's called the Messinian salinity crisis, it turned into a hypersaline death valley. Imagine swimming happily one millennium, only to find your ocean turning into a salt flat the next. Talk about a bad day at the beach. The Miocene's climate transformation created a global sorting algorithm, ruthlessly separating the adaptable from the specialized. Species that had evolved perfect solutions for stable, warm, forested environments suddenly found their evolutionary innovations about as useful as sunglasses at night. Meanwhile, generalists and species pre-adapted to drier, more open conditions found themselves with expanding opportunities, the ultimate ecological gentrification. The Miocene wasn't just a time period, it was natural selection with the intensity dial turned to maximum. Paradise lost, danger found, adapt or die. The ultimate reality survival show, minus the voting and immunity idols. Let's meet the cast of characters in our Miocene drama: the survivors, the innovators, and the evolutionary dead ends who didn't read the climate memo properly. These weren't just animals. They were evolutionary experiments responding to Earth's most dramatic climate makeover. First up, Proconsul, an early Miocene ape that looked like what you'd get if you asked an algorithm to design something halfway between a monkey and an ape, but make it awkward. Living in the forests of Africa around 20 million years ago, Proconsul had the arboreal grace of a toddler on a trampoline, capable but not elegant. With a body about the size of a border collie and a brain that would make a modern chimp snicker, Proconsul represents our family tree before it learned proper posture. No tail, but not yet committed to the ground-dwelling lifestyle that would eventually produce insufferable social media influencers posting from the Serengeti. As forests fragmented, some ape lineages were forced to adapt to more terrestrial lifestyles. Enter Kenyapithecus, strutting onto the evolutionary stage around 14 million years ago with thicker enamel on its teeth, because when fruit becomes scarce, you need dental work that can handle tougher foods. This was the ape equivalent of installing all-terrain tires on your vehicle when the smooth highway suddenly turns into a rocky trail. But the real stars of the Miocene mammalian drama weren't our ancestors. They were the megafauna that exploited the expanding grasslands with all the subtlety of teenagers discovering an all-you-can-eat buffet. Consider Calicotherium, which looked like what would happen if a horse, a gorilla, and a sloth had a genetic merger. Standing up to 2.6 meters tall with massive claws on its front limbs, this bizarre herbivore used its Freddy Krueger hands not for disemboweling teenagers in nightmares, but for pulling down branches to munch on leaves. Imagine seeing this beast rearing up on its hind legs to reach high branches, part terrifying, part ridiculous, like watching a bear try to operate a selfie stick. Then there was Dinotherium, an elephant relative that decided regular tusks were too mainstream. Instead, its tusks grew downward from the lower jaw, curving backward like massive garden hooks. Standing up to 4.5 meters tall, Dinotherium used these bizarre tusks to strip bark from trees with all the finesse of a toddler unwrapping presents. This was evolution's answer to the question nobody asked: what if elephants, but make them even more destructive to trees? The predator scene was equally bizarre. Amphision, the bear dog, combined the worst traits of both animals, the size and strength of a bear with the running ability of a wolf. Picture a 600-pound dog with a bear's attitude problem, capable of chasing you down and then mauling you with the efficiency of both its namesakes. This was nature's way of saying, "You think modern predators are scary? Hold my evolutionary beer." Not to be outdone, Barbara Felis, the scimitar-toothed cat, sported upper canines so long they nearly reached its chin. Unlike its more famous cousin, the saber-toothed cat, Barbarophilis had a bite force that could crush bone like crackers. This wasn't just a predator. This was a walking guillotine with fur and an attitude problem, prowling the Miocene grasslands like death on paws. The oceans were hosting their own evolutionary extravaganza. Megalodon, the largest shark that ever lived, patrolled Miocene seas with a mouth large enough to swallow a small car. With teeth the size of your hand and a bite force estimated at 182,200 newtons, compared to a measly 18,216 newtons for a modern great white, Megalodon didn't just eat its prey, it deleted them from the fossil record. This was the marine equivalent of bringing a tank to a knife fight. But the real ocean success story was unfolding with the radiation of modern whales. As ocean productivity changed with shifting currents, baleen whales began supersizing. The blue whale, still the largest animal to ever exist on Earth, evolved during this period, proving that sometimes evolution's answer to climate change is become so ridiculously large that nothing can eat you and you need less food relative to your size. It's like responding to a housing crisis by becoming the house. Not all Miocene innovations were about size and terror. Some were about finding creative solutions to the changing climate. Enter the hypsodont teeth of grazing mammals' high-crowned molars that could withstand the abrasive silica in grasses and last longer as they ground down. This was the dental equivalent of installing lifetime brake pads on your car. Horses, rhinoceroses, and various antelope relatives all independently evolved these grinding machines, turning the spreading grasslands into their personal salad bars. Speaking of horses, the Miocene was when these animals finally committed to the single-toe lifestyle. Earlier horses sported multiple toes, but as grasslands expanded, species like Merychippus said goodbye to their side digits and hello to a single, hoofed toe, perfect for running across open terrain. Imagine evolving from having a hand to having just a middle finger, except in this case, the middle finger was adaptive rather than just rude. Some Miocene mammals went small and specialized. Microcyopidae, tiny mouse-sized primates, occupied insectivorous niches with the precision of evolutionary watchmakers. With specialized teeth for crushing insect exoskeletons and eyes positioned for depth perception when leaping between branches, these little creatures were the neurotic specialists of the primate world, perfectionists in a time of generalist advantage. Birds weren't sitting out the evolutionary arms race either. The Miocene saw the rise of terror birds, flightless predatory birds, standing up to 3 meters tall with beaks designed for tearing flesh rather than cracking seeds. Imagine a velociraptor in a chicken costume running 45 mph across the grasslands of South America. These weren't your friendly neighborhood sparrows. These were the evolutionary response to the question, what if nightmares could hatch from eggs? In the plant kingdom, grasses were the unquestioned winners of the Miocene climate lottery. As conditions dried, C4 photosynthesis evolved a more water-efficient method of carbon fixation that gave grasses a competitive edge in seasonally dry environments. This wasn't just a minor biochemical tweak. This was a fundamental reimagining of photosynthesis that would change Earth's landscapes forever. It was like switching from gas-guzzling 1970s engines to modern hybrids, except it happened through natural selection rather than engineering. The Miocene even experimented with island dwarfism and gigantism, the tendency for animals to shrink or grow when isolated on islands. Cyprus hosted dwarf hippos and elephants that looked like someone had accidentally washed their normal-sized relatives on the hot setting. Meanwhile, Mediterranean islands featured giant rodents the size of rabbits, proving that even rats can dream big under the right isolated conditions. As the Miocene drew to a close around 5.3 million years ago, Earth's evolutionary laboratory had produced a bizarre menagerie of specialists and generalists, giants and dwarfs, predators and prey. Some were evolutionary dead-ends, fascinating experiments that would leave no descendants. Others were the ancestors of modern species, carrying their Miocene adaptations into the future like genetic souvenirs from this tumultuous time. The Miocene wasn't just a parade of strange creatures. It was Natural Selection's research and development department working overtime, testing prototypes for the modern world in real time. Some designs failed spectacularly. Others became the templates for evolutionary success in the cooling world to come. As if a 17-million-year climate roller coaster wasn't dramatic enough, the Miocene saved its most spectacular plot twists for the grand finale. Prepare for geological drama that makes your favorite disaster movie look like a minor inconvenience. The Mediterranean Sea, that pleasant blue vacation destination where Europeans now go to get sunburned and drink too much sangria, died completely, multiple times. This wasn't a minor recession of shorelines. This was the total desiccation of an entire sea in what geologists call the Messinian salinity crisis, which sounds like a pretentious name for running out of margarita salt. Around 5.96 million years ago, the connection between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean closed as Africa pushed northward against Europe. With no connection to the global ocean and evaporation exceeding river input, the Mediterranean began to disappear faster than ice cream at a summer picnic. Within 1,000 years, a geological eye-blink one of Earth's major seas transformed into a series of hypersaline lakes surrounded by salt flats that would make the Dead Sea look like a freshwater spring. Picture the Mediterranean basin as a giant natural death valley, except 1,500 meters deeper and stretching from Spain to Syria. Salt deposits accumulated to thicknesses of more than a kilometer. The few creatures unfortunate enough to be trapped in the remaining brine pools experienced salinity levels that would pickle a whale. It was the ultimate ecological eviction notice. All marine life, vacate immediately or face desiccation. Rivers like the Nile, Rhone, and Po didn't politely stop at the former coastline. They simply shrugged their liquid shoulders and kept flowing, carving canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon as they plunged off former continental shelves. The Nile excavated a canyon reaching 2,500 meters deep, twice the depth of the Grand Canyon, in what must have been the most spectacular waterfall never witnessed by human eyes. This wasn't just a local Mediterranean apocalypse. The desiccation of a major sea affected global ocean circulation, salinity, and climate patterns. It was like removing a major organ from the planet's circulatory system and expecting everything to function normally. Spoiler alert, it didn't. After approximately 630,000 years of this geological madness, the grand finale arrived. Around 533 million years ago, Atlantic waters found a small weakness in the Gibraltar Barrier. What began as a trickle quickly escalated into what geologists call the Zanclean Flood, arguably the most spectacular waterfall in Earth's history. Imagine water from the Atlantic breaching the Gibraltar Dam, starting as a modest river and escalating into a torrent that would make Niagara Falls look like a leaky faucet. Water thundered through the breach at speeds approaching 100 kilometers per hour, with a volume hundreds of times greater than the Amazon River. Sea levels in the western Mediterranean rose at rates of more than 10 meters per day. This wasn't a gentle refilling of a swimming pool. This was nature's most dramatic plumbing disaster. The Mediterranean basin, which had taken thousands of years to dry out, may have refilled 90% in as little as 2 years. That's not a typo, 2 years to reverse 630,000 years of evaporation. Talk about making up for lost time. The consequences for any unfortunate creatures living in the basin must have been apocalyptic. One day, you're a specialized salt flat dweller. The next, you're experiencing the mother of all flash floods. No time for adaptation. No time for migration. Just a wall of water advancing faster than any land animal could run. While the Mediterranean was performing its disappearing act, Other climatic dominoes were falling across the planet. In the North Atlantic, ocean circulation patterns were undergoing their own dramatic reorganization. The formation of the Isthmus of Panama, a narrow land bridge connecting North and South America, was nearing completion, choking off the direct connection between Atlantic and Pacific waters. This separation of oceans wasn't just a geographical curiosity, it was the planetary equivalent of installing a wall in the middle of your home's central heating system. Atlantic waters, now prevented from flowing into the Pacific, were redirected northward, strengthening the Gulf Stream and ironically bringing more warmth to northern Europe, even as the planet continued its general cooling trend. The global climate machine, already in cooling mode throughout the Miocene, was now reconfiguring for the Ice Age drama that would dominate the upcoming Pleistocene. By the end of the Miocene, global temperatures had dropped 6 degrees from their mid-Miocene peak. Antarctic ice sheets were firmly established, and the first glaciers were forming in Greenland, like ominous previews of the glacial advances to come. For the creatures that had evolved during the Miocene, these final climatic plot twists were the ultimate test of evolutionary fitness. Species that had adapted to the gradual cooling and drying throughout the epoch now faced accelerated change as new thresholds were crossed and feedback loops engaged. Forest fragments contracted further, grasslands expanded their domain, seasonal extremes intensified. What had been a long, gradual adaptation marathon suddenly became an evolutionary sprint to the finish line. It was survival of the fastest, not just the fittest, as environmental conditions changed faster than many species could respond. Marine ecosystems, already stressed by cooling waters and changing circulation patterns, now had to contend with new barriers and connections. The closure of the Central American Seaway didn't just affect ocean currents, it created an impenetrable barrier between previously connected marine populations. Atlantic and Pacific species that had freely intermingled were now separated, beginning independent evolutionary journeys that would eventually produce the distinct marine faunas we see today. This isn't just ancient history, it's the origin story for our modern world. The Mediterranean we know today, the climate patterns that dictate European weather, the distribution of forests and grasslands across continents, the evolutionary trajectories of countless species all bear the scars and signatures of these late Miocene cataclysms. As the final act of the Miocene drama played out, Earth was setting the stage for the next great episode in planetary history. The Pliocene would inherit a world transformed cooler, drier, more seasonal, with continental configurations approaching their modern positions. The Ice Age cycles of the Pleistocene were warming up in the wings, ready for their star turn in Earth's endless climate theater. The Miocene didn't end with a whimper. It ended with the roar of Atlantic waters reclaiming the Mediterranean basin, the grinding of ice sheets expanding across Antarctica, and the whisper of grasslands spreading across continents. It was the climatic equivalent of a mic drop, dramatic, consequential, and impossible to ignore. So here we are, at the end of our Miocene journey, 17 million years of climate chaos, evolutionary experiments, and geological drama condensed into a convenient documentary package for your entertainment. But before you return to worrying about your own trivial problems, let's connect some uncomfortable dots. Remember that middle Miocene warming we discussed? When temperatures were 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and Antarctic ice sheets partially melted? That's essentially the best-case scenario climate scientists are frantically warning us about if we don't get our carbon addiction under control. Except we're trying to achieve in centuries what took nature thousands of years to accomplish. It's like watching someone attempt to cram for a test by snorting the textbook. The creatures that thrived during the Miocene had millions of years to adapt to changing conditions. Evolution had time to experiment, fail, adjust, and try again. Today's climate change is occurring at least 10 times faster than during the Miocene transition. Evolution doesn't have time to save the day. It's like expecting someone to learn a new language while falling from an airplane. Here's the truly delicious irony. Humans, those clever bipedal apes whose ancestors were forced to adapt to climate change during the Miocene, are now creating climate change that's outpacing evolution's ability to respond. We're essentially recreating the conditions that shaped us, except on fast forward and with extra carbon dioxide for dramatic effect. It's like surviving a near-drowning experience only to build a machine that floods the planet. The Miocene extinction events weren't as famous as the dinosaur-killing asteroid or as comprehensive as the end Permian Great Dying, but they were ruthlessly effective at culling species that couldn't adapt quickly enough. Nature's casual brutality didn't require a special effects, budget-just time and changing conditions. Today, we're compressing that time frame while simultaneously fragmenting habitats and introducing pollutants evolution has never encountered. It's like playing ecological Jenga while wearing a blindfold and periodically setting the table on fire. Perhaps the most sobering lesson from the Miocene is that Earth doesn't care about your definition of normal. For most of the past 23 million years, the planet was either significantly warmer or on a cooling trajectory. The climate stability that allowed human civilization to develop over the past 10,000 years is the exception, not the rule. We built our cities, agriculture, and infrastructure during an unusually stable climatic period that the Miocene suggests is anything but guaranteed. As we stand at the precipice of our own climate experiment, casting ourselves as both mad scientists and unwitting test subjects, perhaps we should pay closer attention to the Miocene's message. Adaptation has limits, change can accelerate unexpectedly, and what seems like a stable system can transform into something unrecognizable when pushed too far. Sleep tight, viewers, and remember, the next time you fill your gas tank or book a long-haul flight, you're not just making a personal choice, you're writing the script for Earth's next great climate documentary. Let's hope it's not titled The Anthropocene, how a species smart enough to understand climate change was too stubborn to stop it. Join us next time when we'll explore the Pleistocene ice ages, assuming there's still enough ice left to make the episode worth filming. And herein lies the warning. Our generalist adaptability created a technological civilization that's rapidly destroying the very environmental diversity that forged us. We're specialists in changing environments, now facing an environment changing too fast for even us to adapt to. The fundamental question remains, is specialization or generalization the better evolutionary strategy? The answer seems to be, it depends. Specialists thrive in stable conditions. Generalists survive when everything goes to hell. And right now, we're specialists living in increasingly unstable times of our own making. Perhaps our salvation lies in remembering our generalist roots, the adaptability that got us here, the willingness to change behaviors, technologies, and social structures may be exactly what we need to survive the future we've created. We stand at an evolutionary crossroads unique in Earth's history, a species that succeeded by being adaptable enough to transform its environment, now needing to adapt to the transformations we've caused. The specialist-generalist debate isn't academic anymore, it's existential. After all, the final lesson of human evolution might be this: the ultimate generalist adaptation isn't physical at all. It's the ability to recognize when your current strategy isn't working, and the wisdom to change course before it's too late. Well, congratulations. You're the most dangerous generalist that's ever lived. Not the fastest, not the strongest, definitely not the best smelling. But somehow, you ended up running the entire damn planet. Think of it like this. Most species bet their evolutionary chips on being amazing at one thing. Cheetahs, speed demons that run like furry Ferraris but can't chew through a turtle shell to save their lives. Koalas, masters of eating poison leaves that would kill anything else, but so specialized they'd starve to death in a grocery store. Humans were the evolutionary equivalent of that annoying friend who's pretty good at everything. Jack of all trades, master of none. Except we somehow use that strategy to colonize every continent, invent TikTok, and leave footprints on the moon. For the next hour, we're diving into the evolutionary cage match that made us who we are. Specialists versus generalists. It's the story of how a weird, naked ape with anxiety issues and a penchant for gossip managed to outcompete every specialized badass nature threw at us. The scientific community has a term for this evolutionary approach. They call it play it by ear and hope for the best. Actually, they don't. They call it adaptive versatility. But my version is more honest. Every species makes evolutionary bets. Some, like the giant panda, go all in on bamboo buffets. Others, like cockroaches, spread their bets across the table like drunken gamblers at Vegas. Humans? We found a third option. We changed the game entirely. This isn't just about opposable thumbs or walking upright, though we'll get to those party tricks. It's about a fundamental question. In the brutal casino of evolution, is it better to be a specialist with one perfect skill or a generalist who's decent at everything? For 99% of Earth's history, specialization was evolution's golden child. Then humans showed up and flipped the script so dramatically that we now have people whose only job is to influence you to buy overpriced water bottles on Instagram. So, buckle up. We're about to witness 6 million years of evolutionary experimentation, spectacular failures, and the accidental genius that transformed a vulnerable primate into the planet's most improbable success story. Picture this. 6 million years ago, East Africa. The continent is literally tearing itself apart along the Great Rift Valley. Imagine living in a place going through such intense geological puberty that the ground occasionally splits open. Not ideal real estate. Climate change, the original version, not our current remix, was transforming lush forests into open woodlands and savannas faster than an HGTV renovation show. Our ape ancestors faced the evolutionary equivalent of having your house torn down while you're still living in it. 1 minute, you're happily swinging through trees like it's an arboreal playground. The next, those trees are disappearing faster than donuts at an office meeting. Adapt or die. Evolution doesn't offer a third option. East Africa was becoming the world's most sadistic theme park. Temperatures fluctuated like cryptocurrency. Rainfall became as unpredictable as gas prices. And the neighborhood was getting rough, with predators that make modern lions look like therapy cats. If modern humans had to survive this era, we'd be updating our LinkedIn profiles to lunch open position. These predators were specialized killing machines, each with their own patented method of turning primates into protein shakes. This environmental crisis created a patchwork of habitats, forests, next to woodlands, next to grasslands. Imagine if your daily commute required passing through the Amazon rainforest, Death Valley, and the Arctic tundra. That was basically Tuesday for our ancestors. Our distant relative Ardipithecus found itself in this evolutionary pressure cooker around 4.4 million years ago. These proto-humans were caught between worlds, no longer specialized for tree life, not yet adapted for ground living. Like college graduates with philosophy degrees, they had potential, but no clear path forward. The menu was changing too. Forest fruits were being replaced by tougher savanna foods, roots, tubers, and occasionally meat. This wasn't just switching restaurants. It was having your digestive system and teeth reconfigured while you were still eating. Resources weren't just limited, they were contested. Imagine trying to grab leftover pizza from a table of hangry UFC fighters. That's basically what scavenging looked like when you're competing with hyenas that can crack bones with their jaws. Seasons became more extreme, creating boom and bust cycles of resources. Those who could adapt to feast or famine conditions survived. Those who couldn't became evolutionary footnotes, their bones left for future paleontologists to puzzle over while sipping coffee in air-conditioned labs. For 2 million years, Earth's climate swung between extremes like a meteorological pendulum on espresso. Ice ages came and went. Habitats expanded and contracted. It was environmental whiplash on a planetary scale. In evolutionary terms, specialists were making long-term investments in stable environmental stocks. Our ancestors? They were diversifying their portfolio, hedging their bets against nature's mood swings. Less Wall Street, more Survival Street. Let's address the evolutionary elephant in the room, that famous image of a hunched ape progressing to a proud, upright human. It's evolution's greatest hit and also its biggest lie. Human evolution wasn't a straight line. It wasn't even a tree. It was more like evolutionary jazz, improvisational, messy, with multiple hominins experimenting with different lifestyles simultaneously. Less symphony, more jam session. At one point, at least 4 human species shared the planet: Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, Homo floresiensis, our hobbit cousins, on Indonesian islands, and our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, emerging from Africa. The planet was like a bizarre evolutionary reality show where only one contestant would ultimately survive. Let's talk Neanderthals, poster children for specialization. These weren't the brutish cavemen of cartoon fame. They were cold-weather specialists with bigger brains than ours, sophisticated tools, and cultural practices, including likely ritual burials. They were the CrossFit champions of the Ice Age, incredibly strong, intensely specialized, and probably wouldn't shut up about their paleo diet. Their bodies were literally built for power: shorter limbs, barrel chests, reinforced bones that could withstand incredible forces. If Neanderthals had Instagram, they'd be posting "horse never skip leg day" from their ice cave gyms. Neanderthals were ambush hunters, specialized for close-quarter combat with large, dangerous prey. Imagine MMA fighters armed with spears. Their hunting strategy was essentially get dangerously close to massive horned animals and stab them repeatedly. Not for the faint of heart. Homo sapiens? We took a different approach. Distance weapons, endurance hunting, division of labor. We weren't specialized killing machines. We were adaptable problem solvers who could change tactics faster than a politician changes positions during election season. The stereotypical view is that bigger brains equal smarter species. The reality? Neanderthals had brains as large as or larger than ours. The difference wasn't size. It was architecture and energy allocation. Our brains were rewired for social computation, language, and imagining multiple futures, the neural equivalent of running multiple browser tabs simultaneously. Perhaps our greatest deviation from the specialization playbook was our social structure. Most apex predators are loners or have simple hierarchies. Humans? We created complex, flexible social networks that could reshape themselves for different challenges. From hunting parties to childcare cooperatives to trading partnerships. We weren't just sharing food, we were sharing information. Specialized species passed down instincts. Humans passed down culture, constantly updated and refined. It's the difference between having a fixed operating system and one that gets better with each generation. The ultimate stereotype is that humans conquered nature through superiority. The complex reality? We survived through adaptability. We didn't master any single environment. We became passable at living in all of them, from deserts to tundra, mountains to coastlines. In the end, our ancestors weren't the strongest, fastest, or most specialized species. They were the most adaptable, nature's ultimate generalists in a world that typically rewarded specialization. And that changed everything. Let's get into the evolutionary hardware and software upgrades that transformed us from tree-dwelling apes to beings who argue about pineapple on pizza on the internet. First up, bipedalism, walking on 2 legs. This wasn't just a posture change, it was a radical reimagining of what a primate could be. Imagine if Tesla suddenly announced their new model would fly using anti-gravity. That's the scale of this innovation. Standing upright freed our hands, created more efficient long-distance movement, and reduced sun exposure in open environments. The downside? It's why your back hurts. Our spine is essentially a horizontal bridge forced to stand vertically, an architectural retrofit that would get any modern engineer fired. Those freed hands underwent their own revolution. Our grip evolved from power to precision. Chimps can rip a phone book in half but struggle to thread a needle. Humans can perform microsurgery but need mechanical assistance to open pickle jars. It's a trade-off that perfectly symbolizes our generalist approach. Stone tools appeared 3.3 million years ago, predating our own genus Homo. These weren't just rocks, they were external teeth. Specialized carnivores evolved biological weapons: fangs, claws, venom. We outsourced our evolutionary adaptations to technology. It's like refusing to grow muscles and instead inventing the gym. Approximately 400,000 years ago, humans mastered fire, the first species to control an elemental force of nature. This wasn't just a nice camping trick. It was metabolic revolution. Cooking food externalized part of our digestion, allowing us to extract more calories with less gut tissue. We literally traded intestines for brain tissue. Our brains ballooned to 3 times the size you'd expect for a primate our size. If your smartphone suddenly needed 3 times more battery power, you'd demand serious performance improvements. Evolution demanded the same, leading to an unprecedented explosion in cognitive capacity. But here's the twist. Our big brains weren't specialized computational devices like a chess computer. They were general problem-solving machines, the world's first true artificial general intelligence, ironically created by natural processes. Language emerged as the killer app of these powerful brains. No other species has symbolic communication that can discuss the past, future, hypotheticals, and abstractions. A lion can roar, "Danger here now." Only humans can say, "Remember that dangerous place from last summer? Let's avoid it tomorrow unless we bring the new weapons we've been developing." Our social structures underwent their own evolution. Most primates have rigid dominance hierarchies. Humans developed fluid, task-specific leadership. We can follow the best hunter on Monday, the best navigator on Tuesday, and the best mediator on Wednesday. It's like having specialized executives, but with positions that change based on circumstances. Cooperation reached unprecedented levels. Specialized hunters like wolves have innate, genetically coded hunting behaviors. Humans invented dynamic, culturally transmitted hunting strategies that could be updated in real time. We weren't just working together, we were thinking together. By 100,000 years ago, trade networks moved materials hundreds of kilometers. Shell beads from coastlines appearing deep inland, obsidian tools far from volcanic sources. This wasn't just commerce, it was distributed problem-solving across landscapes, different groups specializing in local knowledge, then sharing through generalist networks. Art appeared at least 45,000 years ago, abstract thinking made visible. These weren't just pretty pictures. They were external storage devices for cultural information. Specialized species passed down instincts through genes. We downloaded our accumulated knowledge into persistent external media, from cave walls to cloud servers. Each of these adaptations represents a bet on flexibility over specialization. Instead of evolving thicker fur for cold environments, we created exchangeable clothing. Instead of specialized digestive systems, we invented cuisine. Instead of wings, we built aircraft that outperform any biological flying machine. The ultimate expression of our generalist strategy isn't found in nature at all. It's our ability to create entirely artificial environments that support our unspecialized bodies. We're so environmentally flexible that we've survived in outer space, a place where every specialized adaptation for Earth is instantly rendered useless. Our greatest innovation wasn't physical at all. It was cultural evolution, a non-genetic inheritance system that moves thousands of times faster than biological evolution. Specialists rely on genetic adaptations that take generations to change. We created a second evolutionary system that can adapt within a single lifetime or even a single moment. 20,000 years ago, Earth was in the grip of the last glacial maximum, the planet's most recent attempt to cosplay as a snowball. Ice sheets covered vast swaths of the northern hemisphere. Sea levels were 400 feet lower. It was climate change on steroids, and it set the stage for the final act in our evolutionary drama. For over 300,000 years, multiple human species had coexisted, each with different balances of specialized and generalist adaptations. Neanderthals with their cold, specialized bodies and close-range hunting, Denisovans with high-altitude adaptations, and Homo sapiens, the extreme generalists. As climates oscillated with increasing severity, specialized species faced a brutal math problem. Their perfect adaptations became perfect liabilities when conditions changed. It's like being an incredible typewriter manufacturer when computers are invented. Specialization becomes an evolutionary dead end. Neanderthals had thrived in cold environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Their powerful bodies required massive caloric intake, up to 5,000 calories daily. When prey patterns shifted or populations thinned, their specialized metabolism became a liability. The very adaptations that made them successful became the anchors that dragged them under. Homo sapiens, meanwhile, were shape-shifting through these changes. When large game became scarce, we diversified to small game, fish, plants. When one technology failed, we invented new ones. Our social networks expanded, contracted, and reconfigured as needed. We weren't surviving despite being generalists. We were surviving because of it. Between 40,000 and 25,000 years ago, all other human species disappeared. Not in some dramatic interspecies war. That's Hollywood, not prehistory. But through the slow, inexorable advantage of adaptability over specialization in a world where change was the only constant. The climax of this evolutionary drama played out in countless small moments of crisis. A changing climate, a failed hunt, a new predator, a strange disease. In each case, specialized species had one response pathway. Generalists had many. It wasn't about being the best at anything. It was about being good enough at everything. Around 70,000 years ago, human population may have crashed to fewer than 10,000 breeding individuals, possibly due to the massive Toba supervolcano eruption. Our species nearly joined the evolutionary exit queue. What saved us wasn't specialized adaptation, but generalized resilience, the ability to change behaviors, technologies, and social structures faster than the environment could change around us. By 15,000 years ago, humans had colonized nearly every terrestrial environment on Earth. From Arctic tundra to Amazonian rainforest, Australian deserts to Andean highlands. No other large-bodied species has managed this range. Cockroaches and rats come close, but they followed in our footsteps, ecological stowaways on our generalist journey. Then came the plot twist that would change everything: agriculture. Around 12,000 years ago, humans began domesticating plants and animals. We weren't just adapting to environments anymore. We were adapting environments to us. The ultimate generalist move isn't to fit into a niche, it's to create your own. Agriculture triggered a cascade of specializations. Ironically, our generalist nature allowed us to create a world where specialization became possible again. Farmers, craftspeople, warriors, priests. For the first time, humans could survive without knowing how to do everything. The generalist species gave birth to specialist societies. This was the evolutionary checkmate. By creating artificial environments that we controlled, we turned the entire adaptive game on its head. Other species had to adapt to changing environments. We simply built environments that wouldn't change, or that changed according to our specifications. The specialists had won every evolutionary competition for hundreds of millions of years. Then, a generalist species changed the rules of the game itself, not by being better at adapting, but by making adaptation increasingly unnecessary. So here we are, 6 million years after our lineage separated from chimpanzees, the last generalist standing in a world we've remade in our image. Every other hominin species is extinct. Every large predator that once hunted us is endangered or gone. We've become so dominant that the greatest threat to our survival is no longer nature, it's us. The supreme irony? Our success as generalists has led us back to specialization. Today's humans are hyper-specialized. We have professional video game players, social media influencers, and people who do nothing but design tiny icons for smartphone apps. We've created a world so removed from natural pressures that most of us wouldn't survive a weekend in the environments our ancestors thrived in.